I don't have to tell you that it's a period of great global and technological change. It's exhausting and confusing. One industry absolutely thrives on that kind of widespread confusion: consultancy. There should be plenty of work for the folks who parachute in and tell companies how to navigate this confusing world. And yet McKinsey, the 400-pound gorilla of strategy consultancies, has somehow fallen below fighting weight. Hi, I'm Jason Palmer, co-host of the Intelligence Podcast.
And I'm Tom Lee Devlin, business editor for The Economist.
Today we're going to be talking about McKinsey, a giant of the consulting world. Remember to listen to the whole episode, just click the link in the description below. Now, first, Tom, what are you seeing happening at McKinsey?
Until recently, McKinsey was growing at a stunning pace. Between 2012 and 2024, its revenue doubled. But that now looks to have tailed off. So estimates have it growing last year by only around 2%. And it's also reduced its headcount significantly since the end of 2023 by about 5,000. So the firm, which is turning 100 next year, is really at a pivotal and uncertain moment.
Now, Tom, before we get into the very present, let's look at the fairly recent past. You were talking about a period of great growth. What was going on then?
Well, McKinsey likes to pretend that its services are sought, not sold, in the words of Marvin Bower, who was its longtime managing partner through the 1950s and 1960s. But that really wasn't the case in its most recent expansionary wave. There was a very deliberate effort that was made to grow the firm. And a big part of that was an expansion in what McKinsey did. So the firm invested really heavily in building capabilities in a number of different areas, particularly its digital practice. So it acquired at least 16 technology consultancies between 2013 and 2023. And more broadly, it made a big push into implementing its own advice, not just around technology, but also operations, procurement, supply chain, and so on.
Okay, and coming to the present moment, the doldrums you describe, what's behind that?
Well, the kind of macroeconomic uncertainty is obviously part of what's going on. But interestingly, McKinsey's biggest rival, which is the Boston Consulting Group, BCG, has continued growing actually very robustly. So there is a lot more to the story here. BCG has played a similar game to McKinsey, expanding its offerings, especially around digital. But my sources tell me that it's done a much better job at deploying and retaining the specialists that are needed to make that kind of advisory work successful. And the consequences have been pretty dramatic. In 2012, McKinsey was about twice as big as BCG. Last year, it was only about a fifth larger. And if things continue on their current trajectory, BCG will actually overtake McKinsey by revenue the year after next.
But it's not just as simple as one big consultancy firm eating the lunch of another for you.
Well, yes. So there's also new competitors emerging here, especially around AI, alongside the upheaval of global trade. This is kind of the big topic on CEOs' minds right now. And they are turning to firms like McKinsey and BCG for help with it. But they're also increasingly turning to new types of partners. And one that is experiencing incredibly rapid growth at the moment is Palantir. In the second quarter of this year, its revenue grew by nearly 50% year on year. It's now more valuable than Chevron or Coca-Cola. And Palantir is really interesting because it's a software company. It sells tools that, among other things, help companies feed their data into AI models. But its approach is to deploy its engineers with clients to help them embed the technology, which ends up coming into really direct competition with some of the AI services that McKinsey is offering. And other technology providers, even the likes of OpenAI, are starting to offer similar consulting-like services.
Consulting-like services. Sending your guys into a company to make it better. It is kind of consulting-like, you have to admit. But these guys are really just narrowly focused on the AI, right? Are they a threat to the kind of the broader model for the likes of McKinsey?
Yeah, I mean, there are certainly limits to how much of a disruption this will be. And there's plenty of people that argue that consulting is always going to be a sideshow for many of these firms who'd much rather be seen by investors as software companies. But the reality is that a lot of bosses are very focused on AI and they're very frustrated with their challenges around making productive use of it. And so I suspect that a lot of technology providers are going to conclude that it's it's actually really essential for them to be in the trenches with clients, not least because working this way will help them improve their tools. And so what you may see is this pushing McKinsey and its traditional competitors back towards their more traditional role as a strategic advisor. And the good news for them is that for now, that core business is growing healthily. But, eventually AI could disrupt it too.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I'll put it this way. Strategy projects, from my experience, basically bundle together two things. One is a lot of kind of deep, profound cogitation. And then there's just a huge amount of grunt work, crunching numbers and preparing PowerPoint slides that underpins that. And that's usually done by the most junior people on the team. And before long, a bot is going to be able to do a lot of that. And if you're a senior partner, you might think that sounds great because you can have fewer of those junior people in your books. But if a lot of the work behind a project can be done by a technology that clients can basically access themselves, that may start to lead to a kind of compression in fees. And McKinsey and other strategy consultancies are betting that their libraries of intellectual property will give them some protection here, which is true. And they've all trained up their own bots on these corpuses of intellectual property. But I think it would be a big mistake, really, to underestimate how quickly these AI models could improve. So McKinsey's second century is going to present some very profound challenges for it.
But I'm reminded of the notion that people often overestimate the short-term effects of a technology and underestimate the long-term. Once all those AI tools get democratized and everybody's working from the same hymn sheet in that regard, McKinsey goes back to what you yourself called the sort of core role as strategic advisor. They'll just simply find new things to advise on in a new world where AI is really sort of spread out. Don't you think?
Maybe. Consultants have an incredible knack for jumping on whatever the next management fad is and turning it into a successful line of business. So possibly, who knows over the long term what's going to happen. I think what we can say for certainty is that the industry is headed for a period of a lot of change.